Eric Smith, so great to see you. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm a massive fan. I've watched you on television for multiple years now and the radio, and I'm a massive fan. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Eric, graduating from Humber journalism and then going into broadcasting, what's your story and why did you want to be a broadcaster?
Um, I'll be honest with you. It's probably like a lot of young kids. Whether they be younger boys or girls. You probably realize at a fairly young age that you're not good enough to be an athlete, like a professional athlete. I mean, I like to think I was a decent athlete growing up, and I played in a number of teams in high school and at various rep levels and everything else. But I was never going to be making a career of this. And I give you a really, really long-winded answer, and the maybe I'll try and cut it between a short answer and a long answer. The semi-long version of the answer, Vince, is I was lucky enough to know, or at least think I know or knew, at a fairly young age that even though I wasn't going to be an athlete, well, what do I want to do? Man, I think I'd like to work in television one day. And television was my first love, or at least in my mind, what I thought was my first love. So when I say I was lucky enough to know or think I knew what I wanted to do, I think that's the greatest challenge that young people have. And when I say young people, whether that's 13, 15, 18, whatever the age may be, do you really know what you want to do with the rest of your life? That's the challenge, I think, for a lot of people. They're maybe, in grade 11, grade 12, maybe they're already in college or university, and they really don't know what they want to do. And it's kind of like, oh, crap, I'm in a 3-year program, a 4-year program. I might be 21, 22 years old and getting set to graduate, and I still don't know if I am doing what I want to do. So I was lucky enough that what I thought I wanted to do turned out to be really what I wanted to do. So that's kind of what I mean by the luck of it. So deciding at a fairly young age that I think I might want to work in television. And I remember thinking, all right, covering sports, how great would that be? And getting a chance to, if I can't play sports, watch sports and talk about sports. And if it wasn't sports, I actually was thinking, well, maybe a weatherman or something like that, because I never wanted to do hard news. I felt that wasn't for me. And I mean, kind of like everybody, especially these days, these last 8-9 months, everybody just gets depressed watching the news and covering, unfortunately, world issues and wars and deaths and everything else. That wasn't ever going to be for me. So I focused a lot of my high school classes on English, and I kind of got away from the math. So I was never a great math student, but I got away from the math and sciences, and I did a ton of history, geography, and English. Those were primary courses for me, and like my OACs and all that to get the grades. And I remember thinking, and again, it's crazy for me to think that it's been this long, because I like to think that I'm still a young guy, but I guess I'm only getting older. It's been almost 25 years that I've been working full time. So it's been over 25 years since I went to school. And at the time, and you could tell me if this mentality still exists, and I think it's absolutely bogus and irresponsible. I think that this mentality exists, or at least existed. There was this idea that, well, if you're really smart, if you got the grades, of course you're going to university. But if you maybe aren't as smart, or maybe you don't have the grades, or maybe you just don't really know what you want to do with your life, well, then, okay, yeah, you go to college. And I think that's completely BS. It's totally bogus. I think that there's as much, if not more, value in college programs, especially for people that know what they want to do, because you get such a focused attention and a focused drive towards one specific goal or one specific area, one specific expertise, as opposed to kind of maybe more of the general type training and schooling and educating you get in university, at least for the first couple of years before you really kind of hone in on your major, quote unquote. So in saying all that, and again, I told you I was giving you the long-winded answer. I applied for university. I had the OACs, I had the marks for university. And at the last minute, literally the last minute, the night before the college applications were due, I remember saying to my parents, and I'm a bit of a worrywart from time to time, I said, like, what if I don't get into university? What if my marks aren't good enough? I don't get accepted to my first choice, my second choice, or even my third choice. What if? Like, what did it cost? I don't even know what it costs now, but I think it was at the time like $50 or $100 or something to, put in your college application as well. So I thought, what the hell? What's $50? I'm going to kind of have that safety blanket of putting in the college application and knowing that I've got that safety net of having at least that option if the university route doesn't work for me. And as it turns out, when I started going to the university open houses and visiting certain places, I applied to Ryerson and Carleton and Windsor. Those were my three top ones. I'm trying to remember if there was a fourth, but those were my three top ones. And I ultimately ended up getting into all three, initially accepted into two and late admission into another. But then I started going to these information sessions for colleges. And I was really liking what I was hearing from these colleges. And I was liking the idea, especially of smaller class sizes. And I'm thinking, all right, rather than being maybe in an auditorium or a big lecture hall and smaller classes and teachers that aren't necessarily professors, but they're people that are in the industry that are working side jobs and part-time jobs in their spare time, in their free time, but yet they're still producers and reporters and directors and writers at various newspapers and radio station, television stations around the GTA. And I'm thinking, okay, this is pretty good. Like this seems like it's maybe the better option for me. And then on top of that, Humber at the time was one of the few colleges, and it's certainly changed now over 20 plus years, but it was one of the few colleges in the province and I think even in the country that also had a residence. So you could get that sort of university experience still going to a college. So I'm thinking, I'm checking off all these boxes, a chance to move away from home and a chance to experience, life away from home and that university, that residence type feel and setting with a smaller class size, with experts in the field, not necessarily professors that are maybe teaching from a textbook, with due respect to professors. I'm thinking this is way better for me. And then on top of that, the Humber program specifically had a lot of credit and a lot of notoriety behind it in terms of the journalism program. And the biggest question for me was opting for the journalism program versus the straight television and or TV and radio broadcasting course. And I thought that the journalism thing would be better for me because, all right, again, playing the what if. What if I don't make it in radio or TV? Or what if maybe I ultimately enjoy writing? Is it better to have the safety net to know that I could write for newspapers or magazines and have that skill set and that training or whatever? And might that help me develop my skills for interviewing, learning how to write in different forms and formats and whatever else? And could the skills be transferable? And as it turns out, yeah, it was. And even the way that the course was set up at Humber, it was sort of a university type feel, even though it was a 3-year program versus your traditional 4-year program at university. The journalism program at Humber was basically designed that you had to, at some point, whether I can't remember if it was after year 1 or year 2. I should probably know that. I think it was after year 2, where you essentially had to pick a quote unquote major. So then you would either go the broadcast route and all of your courses would be geared towards radio and television, or you had to pick the print route and all of your courses would be geared towards magazine and newspaper writing and everything that goes with it. And so I obviously took the broadcast route, and through the program at Humber, they also had an internship program where they guaranteed you placement within your field. Now, you might not get the place you want. You might want to be at, Fan 590 and you get placed at CFRB, or you might want to be at Sportsnet and you ultimately end up at Omni Television. Who knows? But they guaranteed placement. And I ultimately did not get into television, which I told you was my first passion and love and what I wanted to do. And I remember even at the time taking the TSN trivia test that they basically were giving to a lot of intern applicants, and I would have put my sports knowledge up against anybody, and I failed, or at least I didn't pass, or not pass well enough to what they wanted, and so I got turned down at TSN. And I remember being pretty discouraged about it. One of my radio teachers, Judy Charles, came to me and said, "You ever thought about radio?" I said, "I mean, I like radio, but I really want to do TV." And she's like, "Well, and I promise I'm not saying this with any sense of ego or anything. I was just some 21, 22-year-old kid." She's like, "Well, you've got a decent voice, you've got decent pipes, and you seem to be pretty good in this course in terms of the writing and whatnot. And like, hey, it's not to say that just because you go do an internship at a radio station that you won't make it in television one day, or that you can't still have a passion or a desire and a dream for TV, but let's get your foot in the door, and it's still in sports. Let's see if we can maybe get you into the Fan, and why don't you go try there?" So I went for an interview at the Fan, landed the internship, and was very fortunate enough to be hired, employed within 6 months or less. They converted my internship into a paid position, and in less than a year, I was hired full time. So it was kind of just like right place, right time, and opportunity was there. And in conjunction with me starting my internship and starting my part-time role, right at that time within the world or within the industry, Headline Sports started. And of course, Headline Sports ultimately became The Score, which then, a few years back became Sportsnet 360. But when Headline Sports started, that is what sort of, I believe, really propelled me or propelled my career, in the sense that Headline came and started taking sports people from around the industry, writers, directors, producers, editors, on-air reporters and hosts from The Fan, from TSN, from Sportsnet, and then they're just grabbing who they can. And I'd say there was probably at least 10 or so people that were pegged and pulled from The Fan, both on and off air. And that opened up opportunities for jobs that are suddenly vacant. And here's this young kid that's an intern that became a part-timer, and hey man, we got to fill some spots, and you've kind of proven that you've been pretty good, so we're going to give you a chance. And I get hired, like I said, less than a year out of school as a full-time employee at The Fan. And it's just sort of been the slow and or steady climb since then, over 20 plus years.
What a great story, Eric. That's
I
really
know it was
cool.
really long. Sorry.
No, that's like, no, it's, I didn't want to stop you. It's such a great story. You're talking about kind of the perception of university to college. I think university is more theory based and more academia per se, if that's the right word. But then if you look at the other side of college is more practical and you learn more skills. And I went to university, and I'm saying this, I believe in, because a lot of my friends went to college, and the skills that you learn ultimately will take you into your career. But what I found in university is I didn't understand why I was taking all these different courses. And then fourth year, I had the option to choose what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I never really understand that kind of structure. And I think college is the structure of it. I think it's a better way to set you up for success.
Yeah. And I guess the only thing I would say to that, Vince, and I agree 100% with everything you said. It's interesting to me now, and again, I keep referencing, I like to think I'm young, but I'm not. I've been, I've seen it now develop over 20 plus years, where how interesting is it now that most universities, if not all universities, have affiliate programs with colleges. So, like, I know Humber's got the connection with Guelph, where a lot of people now that go to university, to your point, they'll do their 3-4 years, they'll get their degree, but then go, all right, what the hell am I going to do with this now? I need to actually go get some hands-on actual skilled training. I'm going to go do the affiliated program with, blank college on a 1-year or 2-year program. So then, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means that you're getting a ton of schooling and a ton of background and versatility. And hell, it's probably a good thing to have 6 years of school and maybe be coming out a little bit older, a little bit wiser, a little bit more mature at 23, 24 instead of 21, 22. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially when we factor in that when I was going to school, we still had grade 13. So, I was older going to university and college than kids these days, or young people these days, I shouldn't say kids, that don't have that grade 13 now. So you're coming out of grade 12. Man, I don't know if I would have been ready to go to college or university after grade 12 and not have that extra year of grade 13 in high school. I think, not to venture too far off topic here, but I think high school should bring back grade 13. I'll tell you, I even said to a buddy recently, I think even now, especially now, given what's happened in the world over the course of this past 8-9 months, and the lost year that was sort of March to June of 2020, I think that's going to set a lot of people back. A kid that's in grade 3 or 4 or 5, maybe they recover, or even elementary school in general. But if you missed those 3-4 months, which essentially is, for argument's sake, almost half a school year, and you missed that, I would think as a high school student in grade 9, 10, 11, 12, that set me back. Am I really ready for grade 11 if I missed almost half of grade 10? Am I really ready for grade 12 if I missed half grade? Am I really ready for college or university if I missed almost half of grade 12? So maybe it's imperative that the government brings back grade 13 to just kind of give students right now in today's world that little cushion that perhaps they need before transitioning into the next phase into college or university. Again, that's, maybe I know nothing, but that's just kind of my sort of wide-eyed idea that it would be important to bring that back. But to kind of bring it back to what you were saying, I think that the only problem, and I don't know if it's fair to use that word problem, but the potential problem to the college versus university discussion we're having is, go back to what I was saying now almost 10 minutes ago about knowing what you want to do, or at least thinking you know what you want to do. If you go to a college program and you hopefully see it out, but maybe you're a year in, maybe you're 2 years in, or maybe, as I just said, you saw it out and you did your full 3 years, and then you finish and go, oh, this isn't what I want to do. That's all you've done. That's all you've learned. So now, are you starting over again with another 3-year program? Or are you sort of throwing your hands up in the air and what's becoming of my life or whatever? At least in university, if you're throwing your hands up after 2, 3, 4 years, you have had a bit more of a diverse training in a lot of different things, not necessarily geared towards just one job, one task, one future. So maybe that enables you to have a wider range of possibilities to either go still out into the workforce with that degree in whatever it may be, or to then still have that option to go to college at that point. So there are pros and cons to both. I'm not going to sit here and trumpet and say it's only college and you should go to college. I think my whole point is that if you know, or if you have a pretty good idea of what you want to do, don't discount colleges. And I think even you and I are talking about this right now, it seems pretty clear to me that it probably still does exist, as bogus as it is, that there's still this mentality that, oh, I've got to have a degree versus a diploma. Like, hey, not to sound arrogant about it, my diploma's turned out pretty good for me. I mean, there's people that have better jobs than me, bigger jobs than me, make more money than me, no doubt. And I'm talking within the media. But the diploma versus the degree never held me back from getting an internship or getting a job or making my way through the industry. So I think maybe it's more of a family thing, or maybe it's rooted in the way parents are raising their kids, and maybe it's something in the brain where degree. Like, my parents didn't care. Just go to school, be happy, and hopefully find a job that you love and do something with yourself. They never cared that, the diploma that's hanging on their walls in my old bedroom in my parents' house all these years later. They don't care that it's a diploma that versus the degree. It says Eric Smith graduated, period. That's all they cared about. And I think maybe that's hopefully a mentality that changes as we go forward. I'll get off my little soapbox now on universities versus colleges.
I agree, Eric, with what you're saying. And I think there's so much information now out there in the world where you can learn things and you don't have to go to school for it. Such as, I came out of university studying sport management, which is the business of sport. And I learned how to video edit and audio edit and all these different skills, right? That, I didn't learn in school, but I looked on the internet, did research, and
Right.
I figured out a way to do it. And kind of similar to having this conversation, I am not a broadcaster, obviously. I'm just a person coming out of school and want to talk to industry professionals. And communication is really, I think, important in terms of business, in terms of what you do in broadcasting. It's an essential skill. And this experience has allowed me to enhance that communication skills.
Yeah, I think that you're right. There's so much now that, again, I keep referencing age, and it's so weird for me because as stupid or crazy as it sounds, when I was in college, the internet was basically just starting. Like, I remember the first couple of guys in the residence that had, oh my God, he has the interweb. Let's go surf. And it wasn't even at that point, it wasn't even Google. It was let's go search something. And you're too young to know this, but you probably just seen it in movies or heard about it. But clicking on an image and it's taking like frame by frame as it's loading on the page because it's just so slow, and hearing the dial-up connection. But my point in saying all that is, we really kind of get lost or we forget about how fast things have changed in this world and how technology has truly come along. Like, I know people of my generation, we joke about the movie Back to the Future. They said by 2020, cars will be flying, and we're not even doing that. It's like, yeah, but literally 20 years ago, a little more than 20 years ago, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have smartphones. What you can do on your phone now, whatever phone platform may be, Apple, Android, or otherwise, in terms of everything you just talked about, video editing, audio editing, shooting HD movie quality videos, let alone the quality of pictures that you can take. And suddenly, and that's both pro and con, because it allows you the opportunity, if you're motivated and if you're driven, to do it and do it well and do it properly and to teach yourself. But it also, I think, gives a little bit of a false sense to some people where they think, oh, I can do that. And to me, that sort of, at times, and I'm not trying to soapbox this here, but I think at times in a lot of industries, and especially in media, broadcasting, and when I say media, that could be a lot of things. The technology has sort of given some people, not all, but some, the false sense of security, like, well, I can do that, so I can do it as well. Well, I still think that there is a need for proper training and proper professionals, and I do. I don't know that I get offended, but I think I do at times look and say, like, okay, well, like I did go to school for this, so I listen. There are probably some wonder kids out there or wonder people out there that are far better than me, but I don't think it would be fair to me to say, well, I take good pictures. I'm as good as that photographer, or I'm pretty good at editing videos, so I'm as good as that editor at CBC News and that's been doing it for 20 years, or I've got a podcast, so I think I can interview people, and I have a following just like anybody else, and I can do what Peter Mansbridge does, or what Matt Devlin does, or you know what I mean. I think people get a false sense of security because of the access to the technology that they have, and sometimes that makes them think that they can just slide right into a certain role, a certain job, a certain industry, and maybe fast track themselves without the proper training or without following the proper channels that maybe a lot of people before them have done. If that makes sense.
It does. Taking a little bit of a left turn, Eric, but in terms of covering sports on television and radio, is there a massive difference in your preparation process?
There's not a difference in the preparation. There's certainly a difference in the delivery. Obviously, time's a lot tighter in television. You have a little bit more flexibility to talk. Like right now, even just in this, how long-winded have I been? And I know this is technically TV in a sense that we're doing this on video, but obviously, it's more of just a conversational type thing. But if this were a television show, you'd have a producer and or a director screaming in my ear right now, or probably more so in your ear, to shut your guest up because you got to get to commercial, and there's no moving the commercials, and you've got to get to your sponsors, and you got to get that in. And again, that's not to say that there's not sponsors and commercials in radio. I just think you have a little bit more flexibility. And as it relates to live play-by-play, though, there's a major difference in the two mediums in that, and I think you would acknowledge this as a fan, as a viewer or listener. When you're watching a game on television, you don't want to hear your broadcasters as much because you don't need them to describe every single detail of the play because you're watching it. So you want to be entertained. You still want some play-by-play. You still want some analysis. You still want some storytelling. You still want to see the highlights. You still want the energy and the fun that hopefully the broadcasters can provide, the fun, the entertainment, and the information. But at some point, you also just want them to shut up a little bit so you can watch and not just be drowned out by their voices all the time because you're seeing it. I don't need you to tell me everything. I see it myself. In radio, you're not seeing anything. So you have to describe every detail, and you're trying to paint the picture. So whether it's describing the expressions on players' faces or the fans and the colors of the uniform and which direction the game is moving and just any little minute detail that you can give. And the color analyst needs to talk less because he needs to be, or she needs to be quick with their points because you got to get it back to the play-by-play guy, or the analyst has to incorporate a little bit of play-by-play into their analysis in order to make sure that the audience still knows where the ball is, where the puck is, what's happening, where they are in the field, on the court, whatever. Because if I'm not telling you, then you have no idea. You're driving around going, who's got the ball right now? Who's on offense? Who's on defense? Who's handling? Who just scored? What's the score? That's another thing. What's the score? You can't say the time and the score enough. If you tune in to the second quarter of a broadcast on the radio, you should know what the score is within, I'd say, 30 seconds or less, but definitely 60 seconds or less. Because otherwise you're going, who's winning? That's why you tuned in. You want to know who's winning. You want to know what's happening in the game. Where are we? Is it first quarter, second quarter? How much is left in the first half? Are we in the second half? You need to know those things. So time and score, whereas in TV, it's on the screen. I don't need to say it. It's right there for you. So there's a lot of differences in the delivery, but preparation-wise, no, you still have to know, your stats, know your trends, know who's hurt, who's not hurt, know stories and background, and when we say color, the colorful stories that come with having at least one, if not seven tidbits about each guy in case there's any time to give a little bit more background to a player or to a situation, to a story that's been unfolding and whatnot. You got to be prepared. I'll tell you, and you've probably heard this before. We can argue whether it's 95%, 90%, 80%. Let's just say 90. You probably end up not using 90% of the information or the research that you've put into a broadcast, and you might only get to about 10% of it. But you have to have the other 90 for the what if. What if a player gets injured and there's 10 minutes you got to fill? What if there's something that happens within the game? What if your broadcast partner falls ill and has to leave the broadcast? What if? You've got to be prepared for all those and know that you have as much information and as much knowledge to bring to every single broadcast. So you have to prepare for everything, again, no matter what you're doing, TV, radio, or otherwise.
I thought Bob Cole, Eric, was the master of sharing just the best information in terms of calling a game, because he didn't give you too much information, but he didn't give you too little. And every time there was a special play, let's say, there was always kind of a pause that he would take, and he would just let you watch it. So that's why I'm such a big fan of Bob Cole.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We often will call it letting it breathe. Let it breathe a little bit. Sometimes the best moment is simply allowing the fans, the crowd, to take the moment and to have that energy. And that carries through on radio. I think it carries through even more so on television, because you not only hear it, but then you can see it. They show you the images, flash to this fan, flash there, boom, 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 all the different camera angles, facial expressions from players, from coaches, from anybody in the stands. So those moments again are where the pictures, the video, can carry the moment. I think in radio you have to describe it a little more, again, to paint the picture for people. But at the same time, big moments, you still do want to kind of let the crowd and let those microphones pick up the roar of the crowd and whatnot, and allow people to use that to paint that picture for themselves as well, instead of just relying on you to say every single thing. And honestly, I don't know if you can be taught that. You just sort of have to feel it in the moment. And that might sound kind of cheeseball, but I think it's true that just the more you do it, even within a talk show and within a conversation. Bob McCown, to me, was and arguably still is the best in terms of, and it's honestly, it comes down to preference and personal taste, I suppose. Like, I know my wife, I don't know if Bob will watch this or this ever gets back to Bob, but my wife used to hate listening, not to Bob, but just those moments within his show where he literally would take 3 to 5 second pauses, like the pregnant pause. And she would say, man, I thought I lost the signal or something. I thought I had to change channels. And then all of a sudden he started talking it. And I love it, because I think it's also, it's time for your brain to reset sometimes. Like, as much as we're trained or we've been schooled, or we like to think that we have to talk all the time, there is something to be said for, maybe sometimes you need to take that moment to gather your thoughts, or maybe you're doing it intentionally to really hammer home a point that you just made before you begin your next sentence or begin your next point. Or maybe it's again, just the delivery of slowing your cadence down, to really hammer something home, or to just create the drama of the moment, again, whether it's in a play-by-play moment or even just in a conversation, in an interview. And I think Bob was one of the best at that. So like, even within this conversation, we're currently talking about play-by-play and preparation for broadcast, but there's a major difference between preparing for a broadcast and a live play-by-play versus preparing for a live radio show or even a recorded show interview, because the skills that you bring to that and the style that you bring to that is different. There's a major difference between trying to have a conversational, laid-back interview versus certainly a hard-hitting news interview versus live play-by-play. Because the other thing too is, especially when you're live in any format, and this to me is it might be, we're recording it, but we're doing it sort of live to tape. Unless one of us really screws up, this is going to air the way it airs when we're having the conversation. I think that the reason I bring up the difference in live is that this is all ad lib. There's no scripts here. There's no It's all improv. It's all what's coming off the top of my head, off the top of your head. And that's certainly the case in live play-by-play, because you obviously can't predict what's going to happen within a game. So even as much as you prepare your stories and you prepare your stats and you prepare for the broadcast, once that ball goes up, that puck's dropped, or whatever sport we're talking about, you have no idea what's coming, and you're just describing the play. And you might not even look down at your stats and stories at all, because your job is to watch and to talk about it and to deliver. And you just have to be ready to think on your toes. And as I say, use those improv skills and just kind of, be in the moment. And that's something that, to your point about doing this podcast and this show with different peoples from all walks of life, is it ultimately comes down to just conversational skills and interpersonal skills, and being able to talk and to carry a conversation and to hopefully be engaging or interesting, or at least look engaged and interested when you're talking to somebody as well. And I think that then helps in life skills in general, just to have conversations at a party with family that, if you're maybe quiet and reserved, and maybe it helps bring you out of your shell a little bit, or helps you talk to that guy or that girl at the bar, or that helps you in a job interview that you're going for, or even just, walking in the grocery store and being a little bit more personable, not being grouchy, and looking people in the eye. I'm on my kid about that all the time. Eye contact, eye contact, eye contact. I want to see your eyes, because then I know you're listening and you're paying attention. And so I just think that, that it's good on you that you do something like this, because I think no matter what your background is, sport management, communications, otherwise, I think just the skill of talking to people and having conversations and communication in general, I think is something that we all need, no matter what job we're doing.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. And I could completely agree. Before we talk about the Raptors, Eric, I want to ask you, were you always interested in multi-sport? Because you cover boxing, tennis, basketball, you're a columnist as well. Were you always interested in multiple sports?
I was, and I still am. When I grew up, I was kind of a weird Canadian, in the sense that I was born and raised in Canada, but baseball was probably my number one sport, and basketball was a close second. But that said, I was a massive, I mean massive Wayne Gretzky fan. From everything from the pillowcases to the drapes, like Wayne Gretzky. My room was Gretzky, Gretzky, Gretzky. And part of that was, not only was he, the best player at the time, and to me to this day is still the best player of all time, but my neighbors 4 doors up were Gretzky's aunt and uncle and cousins, like the McLeans, Marvin and Sandy. That Sandy's sister was Phyllis Gretzky, Wayne's mom. So it was like, we're not talking like distant cousins. We're talking like first cousins, aunt and uncle, like, mom of, aunt is mom's sister. So I actually had a chance at a young age to meet Wayne a couple of times when he came to visit his aunt and uncle and his cousins. So I had a chance to meet him a couple of times, played road hockey with him, went to the house in Brantford. I've seen now granted, again, this was the early to mid 80s. So it's only bigger and better and more impressive since. But I saw like the shrine, the museum in the basement of all the trophies and everything in the house in Brantford, the Gretzky family home. So I was a huge Gretzky fan. And the reason I mention that is I played road hockey damn near every day of my life. I'm talking in the summertime, like road hockey constantly. But I was always out, whether I'm playing road hockey, whether I'm playing tennis, whether I'm playing wall ball, whether I'm shooting hoops, whether I'm playing in a pickup game, whether I'm out on the baseball diamonds, playing in a ton of leagues and playing rep ball. And I played 4 years of high school baseball for my high school team, and played in front of some scouts and whatnot as well. But again, never good enough. They were looking at other people, not me. I loved sports in general and loved watching and playing a lot of sports. But my true passion always seemed to lie in, as much as I loved Gretzky and road hockey and everything, never played hockey. I was baseball and basketball. Those were my sports. And then I got into tennis a little bit more and played 1 year on the tennis team in high school too. And I just liked, again, watching and following a lot of different sports. And when I got to college, as I talked about sort of the right place, right time, well, the thing I left out, right place, right time, was I'm coming out of college 1 year after the Toronto Raptors come into existence. So here's this kid that loves basketball, that follows basketball, that loves basketball and follows basketball more so than hockey. And at a time where it might not seem like it now, Vince, but I can tell you from living it and experiencing it, there weren't a ton of Raptor fans or a ton of basketball fans, and those that were because they've been following for years, for decades. So they were fans of the Bulls, of the Celtics, of the Lakers, of the 76ers, the teams that you grew up watching in the the 70s, 80s, early 90s before the Raptors even came into existence. So there weren't a ton of people that either knew basketball or even cared about basketball. So for me as a young kid that knew the game, loved the game, covered the men's team at Humber for a couple of years and had some basketball training to some extent in that sense, I was on the bosses right away. Let me go cover the Raptors. Can I go down to a practice? Can I go down and cover a game? Can I do anything? I'll pull tape. I'll cut tape. I'll job shot, whatever it may be. And the two original Raptor reporters at the Fan were George Strombolopoulos and Elliot Friedman. And George ended up leaving, and he was a board op at the time too. Like he was just an engineer, but he was doing kind of stuff on the side part time. This is the other thing about this industry is even to this day, I've got a pretty cool job, and I love and respect and appreciate the opportunity I have and the job I have. But I still do like 7 other jobs with it. It's like, play-by-play and sideline and hosting and writing, because it's just the way the industry is. You're always wearing a lot of hats. So even George back in the day was hustling, but he ultimately left for a job at I think he went to CFNY first before then going to Much Music and then to CBC and whatnot. But he left, and then Elliot Friedman was one of those guys that left to go to Headline Sports, which became The Score. So the Raptors starting as I'm coming out of school, as I'm getting an internship, as Headline Sports starts, it's like all of these things happening at once afforded me the opportunity. I'm very lucky, very fortunate to be, had I graduated 5 years earlier, 5 years later, who knows where I am right now? Because maybe it was just the opportunity of not a ton of people knowing or caring a lot about basketball at the time, enabled or afforded me the chance to have a boss to say, yeah, sure, whatever. Go ahead, go job shadow, go cover. Yeah, if you want to work, 20 extra hours in a day, you go right ahead, go do your thing. We could use the bodies, but we're not paying you for it. Or yeah, sure, whatever. Go cover that Raptor team. There were a lot of people that thinking Toronto's not going to fly as a basketball city. The Raptors aren't going to last, and especially when the Grizzlies ended up bowing out, less than 3/4 of a decade, and the Raptors aren't going to last. This is a fringe sport. It's not going to happen. And I, myself, Paul Jones, we kept fighting that. So anyways, again, very long-winded way of saying to you, I have always watched and followed and cared about a lot of sports, but basketball created the opportunity for me very early in my career, and I was able to latch on to that and thus able to grow within that sport, with that team, and within the broadcast world as a result of that. But then as the years have gone by and the experience has hopefully spoken for itself, and again, I don't say that arrogantly, hopefully my work has spoken for itself, that has afforded me the opportunity within the industry to have some bosses approach me and say, hey, ever considered doing something else? Like, could we tap on your shoulder, do some tennis matches in the summertime? Sure, yeah, I'd love to do that. I know tennis. Like, yeah, let's try it. And 1 year becomes 2, becomes 3, becomes 4, and here you are. The boxing thing, I'll tell you though, was I've only done the boxing the one time, and I would love to do it again. But the boxing had the 2012 Olympics. That was, again, and this is kind of the way the industry is to some degree. And you could probably say this about a lot of industries: right place, right time. Unfortunately, Jeff Merrick had some sort of issue pop up in his family, and it's something personal, not my place to say, but he had a family issue arise less than a week before the Olympics started. And he was supposed to be calling men's boxing for the, for Sportsnet, for the broadcast consortium, because that was the year where Sportsnet, TSN, and I think it was CBC, all three of them sort of combined resources and kind of became friends for a few weeks and broadcasted together. But Merrick was supposed to be calling boxing, and 6 days before the Olympics started, I was in the backyard at my house, and we're talking, I guess that was late June, early July. I can't remember the start date of the Olympics that year, but it was literally, I know it was 6 days. It was less than a week. My phone rang, and it was Rob Corte, one of the bosses at Sportsnet. I'm like, why is Rob Corte calling me in the middle of the summer? Like, this is my off season. So when the boss is calling in the off season, I don't know. I don't know if this is good news. I'm kind of, hello. And he said, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And then it was, what do you know about boxing? Well, when the boss asks you a question, you rarely will say, I don't know anything, or, even if you have to kind of fudge and lie your way, oh, I know everything. Yeah, of course I know boxing, because something's got to be coming. And I said, well, I mean, and I was honest in the sense, I'm like, well, listen, I'm not an expert by any means, but I mean, I watch boxing. I tune into the big matches. I've watched it since I was a kid. I mean, I've never boxed, but I mean, I like to think I know a little bit about it, but I mean, I don't know. Why are you asking? Well, what do you think about calling boxing for the Olympics? I said, like the Olympics, like these Olympics in 6 days Olympics? And he said, yeah, there's, Jeff, had to bow out last minute, really didn't want to, but circumstances are what they are, and he's not able to do it. We need a favor. We need you to step up. And I thought, holy blank, like, okay, yeah. So I got a binder about like this thick, and it was crammed because I wasn't just doing one weight class. I did all weight classes for the men's boxing. There was somebody else calling the women's boxing, but I did every weight class for the men. So by like day 2, I had already called like 17 matches because they were just like one after the other after the other. And it's only 3 rounds in the Olympics and whatever. But I also had the luxury and the benefit of having Russ Anber as my analyst, and Russ is like the best. Like, just wind him up and watch him go. I mean, I felt like at times I was just saying, like whatever, like Joe Smith from the U.S. versus, John Jones. Well, John Jones exists, but John Jones from Canada. Smith in the blue shorts and Jones in the red shorts. And the bell goes, round 1. And Russ, blah, 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 and I would just uppercut, blah, 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 solid block, whatever. I'm just like ad-libbing here. And then Russ, blah, 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 blah. Bell goes, oh, it's the end of the first round. Russ, blah, 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 blah. Like, I swear I felt like I was just saying, like, name, colors, start, end of round, because Russ was just talking so much and giving you everything because he just knew so much that, and again, it wasn't that simplistic, but it felt that way sometimes, that he made my job so easy. And that's ultimately the good sign, or great sign, of a good broadcaster as well, is whether we're talking play-by-play or color analyst or even within a talk show, you're only as good sometimes as your partner. A good play-by-play guy should be setting up his analyst to have that platform to be the star and to tell the stories. Like, that's why they're there. You're the former player, you're the former coach, you're the former executive, you're the guy that's the trainer, whatever it may be. You've got the knowledge, the experience, the background, the stories. Use it. But at the same time, the analyst shouldn't be talking over the play-by-play guy all the time, because the play-by-play guy still has a role to do and a job to do. So it needs to be the synergy of a team. But even, as I said, within the parameters of a talk show, whether it's your co-host on your show, if you have one, you need to play off one another. You can't be just totally talking over your host all the time. There needs to be that give and take. But even if it's just a single host, why do you have a guest on? You have a guest on to tap into their stories and their expertise and what they have to bring. So you allow your guest to be the star. Yeah, people tune in to watch Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, and they need to be funny, but their moment is in the monologue, or their moment is in the bits. When you have somebody on, it's not to say that you don't talk and you don't have a conversation, because to me, again, the best interviews are the conversations where you are providing your opinion, and you are jumping in, and you are providing, again, that give and take. But at the end of the day, you know that now it's your job to step back into the shadows and allow the person who you've invited onto your show to have their moment, because that's why you asked them to come on. And I'm not saying that about me right now. I'm talking about just in general. Those to me are the best broadcasts, when you're allowing people to shine and you're playing off one another, and it becomes more casual and it's not rigid. And I would say that's something that you want to transfer into life in general, a give and take within a marriage, within a relationship, within a conversation, within a job interview, within a chat over a couple of beers at a party with maybe even somebody you just met. It needs to be kind of the give and take. I think we got way off topic on there. Yes, I like lots of sports.
That's great, Eric. It's fascinating how you say that, Eric, because one of the things that I know, especially early on in doing these recordings and speaking with industry professionals, is that I didn't like interruption, because I feel like if I'm interrupting, then I'm not really listening to the point, or I'm not really listening to the story.
Mm-hmm. So you're too busy trying to get your point in.
Right. So I picked that up like a couple episodes in, and that's why I like listening to the full answer. Like, talk to Joel Darling, who's the executive producer with Rogers, and we're talking with him about clips, and I spoke with Paul Henrik about like clips, and um, the one thing about clips is you don't really hear about the full extent, right? And to such as this, if you watch 30 minutes or 35 minutes rather than watching something 2 minutes, I think the meaning sometimes is different.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I'll admit to you, if we were live on a radio show right now or live on a television show,
Mhm.
I would be even conscious. And maybe it's because I've been in the industry or whatever, but I would be conscious of knowing I can't give you a 9-minute answer like I have on a couple of occasions in this conversation. Like, I don't know if you were trying to keep this to 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and we've already
Oh
done, I
no,
think, 45. Um,
it's okay.
but I think in these type of forums and settings, I feel the ability to maybe speak a little bit longer. And I'm
Mhm.
also, I know that I'm guilty, and trust me, my wife would tell you, I tend to drag on a lot. So maybe I need to be reeled in a little bit. But I think that within a certain show, I would know there are time restrictions. You need to keep it tight. And I think even athletes and coaches, and there's the pro and con of this as well. Athletes and coaches, I think, have been trained to speak in sound bites at times, where that becomes frustrating then as a reporter, as a broadcaster, as a host, as an interviewer, whatever, role you want to say, because maybe you're trying to get more out of the player, you're trying to get a better answer or a longer answer or something that's just not a stock answer or cliche or whatever. And it's often difficult to pull that out because is that they've been trained, because I can tell you flat out, these guys actually do go to media training sessions, and there are people that do this, that go in and visit with teams and tell them this is how you answer XYZ, and this is how you can answer without really answering, without really, like, this is a job and this exists. But is it because they've been trained that way, or is it because they don't trust you, or is it because they don't want to put their foot in their mouths, or is it because they're just shy? Or then do you get the guy that gives you a longer answer, a more passionate answer, a more honest answer, but then you've got, and I don't mean to use Joel as the bad guy here, but then you've got a boss that's going way too long. That needs to be cut down. Like, well, no, it's like that 60-second answer was incredible. It needs to be 30. We only have time for 30 seconds. Well, what am I going to cut out? Like, I can't. Well, we got to cut it. We only have 60 seconds. So that's where you run into, even when guys give good answers or longer answers, do you have the time for it? Or whomever edited it, did they edit the right portion that you wanted as the interviewer? And then we speak about then the team concept and definitely the team mentality that needs to exist within my world, at least within broadcasting, where it's not just as simple as the viewer at home or the listener at home seeing or hearing the final product. 9 times out of 10, there was a reporter, let alone the interview subject. And then there was a producer and maybe an associate producer and an editor and a director and a sound guy. There might be anywhere from 2 to 3 to 7 people working on one thing, and they all need to be working collaboratively and know that you know the vision of what I thought this would look like in my mind is the same as your vision and doesn't come out completely different, let alone the intent of what was said by whomever, player, coach, whatever. Does it ultimately transfer out into the final product? Because did it get chopped down and edited, to your point, where maybe you lost the context or the tone of which something was said? And that's why I've always felt too, when I read something, to kind of again veer off this topic just a little bit, when I read something in a newspaper or a magazine, if it's something that's quasi-inflammatory or edgy, I take it with a grain of salt to some degree. And that's not to imply that the writer isn't accurate in his or her reporting and didn't properly quote his or her subject or interview subject. But I would love, if it exists, if it's possible, I would love to be able to see the clip, or at the very least hear the clip, because then I can see the body language, the facial expressions, and or hear the tone in which the words were said as well. Because I could say something to you right now that just by my facial expression you would be able to tell that I was joking, or that I was serious, or that maybe I was shifty and nervous. Or even if we shut the cameras off, maybe you could tell by the way my voice quivers or rises or lowers or whatever it may be, you might pick up on a hint. But if it's just in black and white in the written word, maybe it looks completely innocuous. Maybe it looks completely innocent, or maybe it looks very inflammatory and it wasn't meant to be that way. So that's where, again, the ability to have that one vision and to kind of be working towards that one goal and accurately depicting things, telling things, reporting things, I think is paramount to everything.
That's what I found so fascinating about Twitter, Eric. And that's a totally different conversation. But with Twitter, because it's written, and when you read it, it might be different than in a video where if you look at it, like you said, it's a bit different.
Well, I'll tell you just quickly, and I promise I'll be quick on this one. Is one of the things I know I've found myself guilty of getting into a bad habit of for at least a decade now, and I just did it to you 10 seconds ago. I find that because of the type of world we live in now, and again, pulling up my soapbox, I think that we've become, as a society, sensitive, both pro and con. We need to be more aware of issues. We need to be more aware of people's feelings. We need to be more aware. Again, the list goes on. Whether we're talking about mental health, whether we're talking about race, whether we're talking about sexism, whether we're talking just political issues, whatever it is. Again, it's a long, 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 long list. We need to be more aware of things. We need to be more sensitive of things. We need to realize that things are not only, oh, they're different now. No, they've been different. We just maybe have been too ignorant or too lazy or too selfish to acknowledge or understand or appreciate that all of this stuff has existed, and we need to be more aware of it. I will say, but I think that there are some things as well within society that we've become maybe too sensitive to. So we become, like, I don't want to offend you, but, or I don't mean to imply that, but. So I find that because of social media, to your point, the written word, tone and context can be lost, and people immediately are just waiting to be triggered, waiting to be offended. So now it's almost like you have to use up your 40 of your 140 or 160, whatever the hell it is, characters to say, I don't want to be rude, but, or I don't mean to offend anyone, however, or please understand where I'm coming from when I say that, because if you don't give that context, that people are just, I shouldn't say people, some people or many people, depending on how you look at it, are waiting to be offended, waiting to be triggered. And I think that has created the angst and animosity that can often exist within the social media world. And then there are just people in general that forget issues and forget opinions and forget everything I just said. There are just people that are looking to be jerks and looking to just be antagonistic and that feel that they have the right to be rude to you or to push back at you and to try and push your buttons, and they're trying to. Then there's also the other side of it where there might be somebody like in my position where I attempt to respond to almost everybody. I don't respond to everybody every single day. It becomes difficult, but I try to respond to as many people as possible. It might take me longer sometimes than others, but then you really kind of have to get to the point where you're saying, is this really worth my time? Like, even if somebody's been, I don't want to just respond to the positive responses. I want to be balanced and fair and be open to criticism or open to other opinions or open to people that maybe just don't like me or didn't like my work or whatever it may be. I can't just always be lovey-dovey and only take the compliments and never take any criticism or feedback that might be construed as negative. But at the same time, is it being delivered responsibly, maturely, properly? Is the criticism being delivered in a nice way, or are you just looking to be an a-hole and looking to try and get into some sort of Twitter spat or social media war or comment with negativity on pictures or videos on Instagram and whatever? It's again, I'll sound like the old man here. It's a tough time to be growing up to be a young person because it's certainly difficult for old people like me as well. But to be young right now and to know that at 10, at 15, at 20, whatever it may be, that what you say, let alone what you post or what you comment, definitely does, not just in a cliche way, it does live with you and can live forever. And you're just a screen grab away from saying one dumb thing or doing one dumb thing. And that could potentially derail your entire life, literally, your career, your personal life, and everything else. Man, I didn't have that when I was growing up. And it's got to be difficult to be a kid right now. And I think that's where maybe it just comes down to, and I don't want to sound too lovey-dovey here, but it just comes down to being a decent person and hopefully, and listen, I'm not perfect by any means. I have my bad days. I have many bad days, and I'm not always the nicest guy in the world. But trying to be nicer more than not, and trying to be decent more than not, and trying to be good more than not. And again, I fail at that many times, but I think there just are more people that fail more than me. I guess, if that's the way of saying it. I think that it's a tough time. It's a tough time to be dealing with. Again, going back to the technology, the pros and cons of technology, and the pros and cons of the access to people and to information and to people's lives and whatever, and what we choose to share or not share, and how we choose to interact with folks. All of that stuff. It's mind-boggling and mind-blowing sometimes.
So you cover the Raptors very well, and I wanted to ask, what are your predictions in terms of roster moves from the front office?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it goes without saying, I have no idea. So this is just more my gut, my opinion, and what I would do. I think that if you kind of look short and long term, the Raptors were in a position just a couple of years ago to have three very good point guards in Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, and DeLon Wright. And we were talking a lot about the potential future of the 1-2 punch of maybe Fred VanVleet and DeLon Wright maybe being together. And if Kyle Lowry were to ever retire or move on, you think you've got, you hand the keys to the organization over to one or both of those guys. But then as the years kind of unfolded over the last couple of years, there wasn't room for both. There needed more wiggle and flexibility to the roster, and DeLon Wright ultimately moved on and now is playing in Dallas. So now you've got Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry. Well, Kyle Lowry is a free agent at the end of this year, and I have been on the record many times saying that if Kyle Lowry wants to come back, he can come back. If he wants to retire as a Raptor, I believe he's earned that right as the greatest Raptor of all time. Kyle Lowry basically has free reign to do what he chooses. So if he wants to come back, he's back. If he wants to move on, he moves on, either via trade or via free agency. I will never say trade Kyle Lowry. He has earned the right to decide what he wants to do, whether it's staying or going. But in saying all that, you have to at least be aware of or be prepared for the possibility of maybe not having him at some point in the next year or so. Well, to that extent, then, I think it's imperative that you re-sign Fred VanVleet. You have to, because I think he's the point guard of the future for you, and he's the guy that takes this team into the next generation, in a sense. So I think you have to keep Fred. It's just a matter of, will you have the ability to do so? Because he has definitely earned the right to have a major payday, and he's going to earn minimum $20 million a year, probably closer to 25. And will the Raptors be able to pay that? It's going to be close. I think they can, but the key for them is, can they give Fred the money he wants while still keeping the financial flexibility that the Raptors and every team in the league wants for next offseason, when Giannis Antetokounmpo, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Rudy Gobert, Andre Drummond, Victor Oladipo, Mike Conley, the list goes on, DeMar DeRozan, all these guys are free agents. The summer of 2021, or the offseason of 2021, is bananas. With Giannis being at the top of the list, and of course you've heard all the rumblings about the possibility maybe of the Raptors being in those sweepstakes. I don't know if that's legit or otherwise, but listen, the Raptors will be interested if Giannis is interested, as will the other 29 teams in the league outside of Milwaukee be interested. So you have to be conscious of the contract for Fred not going over the number that would take you out of being in those conversations with any number of these marquee free agents next year. But then, but if you don't bring back Fred, you might not have a point guard next year if Kyle Lowry decides to walk and Fred's already gone, and you don't have DeLon. He's been gone for a couple of years. So it's a very interesting time. And if I had to rank the three primary guys for the Raptors, there are others, but the three top guys being Fred, Serge Ibaka, and Marc Gasol. I would put, Ibaka second and Gasol third, and that's not meant as a knock to Mark. I think it's more just an age thing. But I do think you need to be concerned about the fact that how thin is your front court if you don't have at least one of those guys back? Because right now, there aren't a lot of bigs, whether we're talking power forwards or centers. There's not a lot of length or size or strength or depth in the Raptors front court right now. If you lose both of Ibaka and Gasol. So that will be something that will then absolutely need to be addressed in free agency and or via trade with other guys if both of those guys ultimately don't resign. And I don't think you'd have the money or the flexibility financially to bring back all three. So it's probably going to come down to picking and choosing. And then the other thing is, to take it one step further, when I talk about that wiggle room and that financial flexibility and whatnot, if your top two guys are Ibaka and Fred, well, do you have the money to be able to do that and the flexibility to be able to do that? Or might it be we can only pick one of our two top guys, but then maybe get our third guy on a shorter deal, a smaller deal, a lesser deal that allows us still to have that flexibility and that freedom. So then maybe it becomes Fred and Mark and not Fred and Serge or whatever. I don't know. Again, I'm just kind of spitballing and speculating. But I think, again, to kind of hammer home the point, that the top importance to me is Fred VanVleet. I think, you want him back, and hopefully he, listen, I know he likes the city and he likes the organization, but, he's made no bones about the fact, and even in just recent days, he's looking to get paid, and rightfully so. He's earned that right, so he should get paid.
I agree, Eric. I think this is maybe the management side of me. I hope Masai resigns. I like everything about him. Everything as a leader. I like everything as a manager. I just think he's a class act, and the Raptors are obviously very fortunate to have him. And I hope they can work things out and come to an agreement where he resigns long term, because I'm such a massive fan, and I think most of the city are a massive fan as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that's the other potential free agent we didn't even talk about, right? I mean, it's Masai and his contract expiring, and listen, I think much like I said about Fred, I would certainly say the same thing about Masai. He's earned that right to he probably even sets the figure. What he's done for the organization, let alone for the city, and arguably for the province and country, and what he stands for as a person, let alone as a basketball executive. I think the sky's the limit for him. I get, without knowing this personally, maybe he has other aspirations or goals within basketball, but you've won a championship. So is it then just to win a championship somewhere else and to prove that you can take another team and build them up again? Or do you have drive and motivation outside of basketball? For as active as he's been with his own charitable ventures and with his own organization with Giants of Africa, is your dream outside of the NBA? Is it outside of the Toronto Raptors? Is it politically driven? Do you have goals or aspirations to be a politician one day, to work for a government, to I don't know what? We neither one of us know that answer, and Masai is a very nice man and certainly a well-respected man, but I think he's a fairly private man as well, and he has chosen to, and it's more than his right to not talk about stuff like this right now, and to just kind of let the process play out. And he has said, like, he's not thinking about the contract. I got to imagine he has thought about it, but he says it's he's here to run the Toronto Raptors, and until he's not, then that's what he's going to do. And I hope, just like you, that he's around doing it for a long time. I really do.
Awesome. I have one more question for you, Eric, because you've traveled, you've been in the industry for a long time. What would you say the most memorable moment in your career so far in broadcasting, or even as a fan?
Yeah,
a special moment.
It's honestly, Vince, it's tough to give you just one, because I've been fortunate enough and lucky enough to have many. But I'll try and cut it down to just two. And one, I think, is obvious, and that is the Raptors winning the championship. And to know that, selfishly speaking, even, I had a chance to be a part of history. I was calling the game on the radio. So as much as it would have been amazing to be a part of the television broadcast and to do the post-game interview and to be on the floor, with the ticker tape falling on me and all the confetti coming down and interviewing players in the moment, whatever, that would have been incredible. Trust me, it was just as amazing to be calling the game on the radio and to know that, when you listen back to the Raptors winning the championship, whether it's their only championship or whether it's their first championship of 3, 5, 10, whatever it may be one day, my voice, my call will be part of history. So that's a thrill for me as a fan, let alone as a broadcaster, to know that I own that little piece of history. It's kind of just cool to think of it still, and to know that even in that moment, like, because I call the games for the team and we're team broadcasters, we're considered part of the travel party, the team, the group of people. And the reason I say that is we were very fortunate to be invited into the locker room about 90 minutes after the game and after the kind of champagne shower has sort of, well, maybe not ended, but quieted down. And, I had my picture taken with the trophy like less than 2 hours after the championship. And my, suit is soaked in champagne, and I fulfilled my work commitments and everything. But there I am holding the trophy and posing for the, pictures by myself, and then with Jonesy, and then with other members of our broadcast crew. And then Kyle Lowry jumps into a picture and all that. And then even months later, I had an opportunity to have the trophy for a day and to be able to show it to friends and family and to have it in my home and whatnot. So it's very, very, very cool to know that, even if I were to die tomorrow, and knock on wood, hopefully I don't, but that I had that moment in my life, let alone in my career. But the other one, crazy as it may be, even though I've had a career in sports, and I told you I never wanted to cover news, the attacks on the Twin Towers on September 11th, I was at that time in my life and in my career hosting the evening talk show on Fan 590. Myself and Bill Hayes, we were on Monday to Friday, 7 to 11. And so I was on the air on September 11th, the day of the attacks. And I sat at home and watched everything unfold over the course of the day. And then knew that I had to go on the air live that evening. And it was difficult, to say the least, let alone just mind-numbing to try and figure out what you were going to say and how you were going to say it, and how you were going to suddenly, transition from a career and a life in sports to suddenly talking about such a serious issue and such a dramatic event, and all of the feelings and thoughts that people had. And honestly, at the time, wondering, are we on the brink of World War III? There's conversations about whether, what is the U.S.'s reaction going to be? What's the retaliation going to be? How important will Canada play a role in all this? Is there going to be a draft if we go to war? All this stuff. These were topics and these were discussions that were going on. And to suddenly switch from sports to that, not only for that day, Vince, that evening, we became a news station or just a event station and just a cultural station or just an outlet for people to vent and to talk for at least 2 weeks, if not 3 weeks. Like, we started to get into some stories that had sports angles to them as it relates to when will we be back playing? How amazing was that moment when the Mets and the Yankees got onto the field in the Subway Series in the midst of all this and sort of rejuvenated a community just because they were able to play that game, and to see the FDNY and the NYPD and all the first responders on the field and all that. Like, you found sports angles, but for a while, we weren't talking sports. We were just talking issues as it related to it. And that night, like that first night on September 11th, we had on the former head of the Transit Commission in New York City, who was actually friends with the father of one of the producers at our station. So that in itself was incredible to hear about the infrastructure that would have existed and everything. But then I'll tell you, the other thing was, we spoke to a survivor that night, like on the day of. And again, this guy was working in Tower 2. I don't honestly remember what floor. I want to say it was in the high 20s or low 30s. He was in Tower 2, and I'm trying to remember 20 years later the details, because I don't want to misrepresent here. He knew that Tower 1 had gone down, and he was in the staircase trying to get out of Tower 2. He got out of Tower 2 and was okay. But the problem at the time was all of the cell phone lines, all communication within the city was jammed. Like, nobody was able to make phone calls especially into the city. And if you got a signal, it was like rare, few and far between. So one of the producers at the station knew this guy, again, through his father, said, I know person X, see if you can contact him. We don't know if he got out. Keep calling the number. I had the home number and I had the cell number. So I and my producer and Bill Hayes, we kept calling. And we finally got him on his cell phone. He picked up, and he didn't know who the hell I was. And I explained the connection and how we got his number and spoke to him. And he was at like a coffee shop. He didn't know where he was going, where to go next, how to get home, whatever else. But he said, can you call my wife and tell her I'm okay? I can't get through to her. And I said, well, I've been trying. I can't get in either, but can he's like, please, please, please try. Da, da, da. So I called and kept calling and kept calling and kept calling. And ultimately the house phone rang, and the woman picked up and thought, just like immediately was shouting out her husband's name. And I said, no, it's actually Eric Smith. I'm calling from a radio station in Toronto. And she's crying and completely, obviously, understandably, completely bewildered. And as I calmed her down and tried to explain the situation, I told her that I've spoken to your husband and he's alive. He survived. And he wanted me to call you, and he wanted me to that he's alive and that he's trying to find his way home. And she's clearly, completely beside herself and starts bawling again, and is just sort of sideways on the phone with me. The fear and the pain, and then suddenly the exuberance and the relief of knowing that he was alive, and then still trying to process who in the hell I actually am and why I'm calling. So that moment, and then to reconnect with the man a couple of hours later and to do the live interview and to hear him recount his day and his story of getting out of the tower and living through it. That to me, right up until the championship for the Raptors, was the number one moment. So as much as I've been able to cover sports and talk to some of the greatest athletes and interview some of the greatest athletes and experience games and live games and whatever else, at the end of the day, even though I never wanted to get into news, that was the top moment, because it was just such a life-changing experience to live through that day, to live through those shows. But then, even as I said, just that moment specifically, and those conversations specifically with those people, that kind of to this day still stands out more than anything else.
I fought back tears, Eric, when you were telling me that story. Wow. Eric, what an honor this is for me to speak with you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time today and your insights. And I can't believe how many topics that we covered. It was
well, I kind of talk. I kind of talk a lot, so no, I don't think either one of us thought we were going to do almost an hour and a half. So,
yeah,
I actually got to go. So I got a show that starts soon. But I appreciate it, man, cool. and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And as Paul Hendrick says, we hope we informed and entertained, and see you next time.